It's time for the RMAC Radio Show, featuring all the latest information from around the Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference. The RMAC is a proud member of NCAA Division II. Now, here's your host, Eric Danner.
Welcome to the RMAC Radio Show, week number 10. My name is Eric Danner. A big show planned for you today. We have our soccer championships coming up later this week as Regis University won both the men's and women's RMAC soccer championships this year. We're going to have Tony McCall, the head men's soccer coach at Regis University, on in our second segment. We're also going to talk a little RMAC football as CSU Pueblo remains to be the number one team in the country, but no longer the number one team in the region. But if you watched any sports this past weekend, and maybe checked out the World Series, you saw a guy named Sergio Romo, who we know very well here on the RMAC Radio Show. He plays for the San Francisco Giants. He was named the RMAC Baseball Player of the Century a couple years ago in 2009. He got the game-winning save in the final game, one of those moments you dream of in your backyard. And his head coach, when he played at Colorado Mesa, then Mesa State, is Chris Hanks, and he joins us now on the RMAC hotline. Coach Hanks, I got to imagine you're doing pretty well today.
Yeah, it's great to have a guy do so well.
Talking with Chris Hanks from Colorado Mesa University. Coach, let's go back to when Sergio was playing at Mesa, and I know he only played 1 year for you. Kind of tell us exactly how he wound up in Grand Junction.
Well, he was a kid out of Arizona Western Junior College that we recruited, but we did not get. He went to the University of North Alabama, and after a year there, he did very well there at North Alabama, but it wasn't a fit. He wasn't happy. He was playing summer ball for the Lake Havasu Heat with a couple of our players at the time, and they had called and they said, hey, Romo's on our team. He's not happy at North Alabama. He'd like to transfer, and would we be interested? And, of course, we were because we knew about him, and we did all the necessary paperwork, and North Alabama released him, and he came our way, and obviously I believe he was pitcher of the year in the conference, and had a great year for us.
Talking with Chris Hanks from Colorado Mesa University. And Coach, the 1 year he played in the RMAC, one of those all-time years. I think he was 14-1. His ERA was somewhere around 2.3, somewhere in there. I think his strikeouts to innings pitched was 129 to 124. Just an outstanding season. Now, when you talk to people about Sergio and what kind of player he was, almost inevitably, when you're talking to other teams, what was his demeanor on the mound? And sometimes he was doing the wagging of the finger and he'd strike a guy out. A very emotional kind of player, but it seems he kind of figured that out, how to use that emotion to his advantage as now he's, a two-time World Series champion.
Well, he was a guy that you certainly didn't want to play against. You wanted him on your team, and teams did take exception to some of his antics. First of all, I'd clarify that Sergio is a very good person. He's a great
Absolutely.
guy, wonderful teammate. But you're right, he did figure out, what he was doing in those instances. He would incite things a little bit. I think that kept him sharp. It fired him up, and he even does it to this day. He's doing it more as he's become more comfortable in Major League Baseball, and it was something, as I told some people yesterday, he, whether he was here or whether he's been in the big leagues, he, the larger the stage, the greater amount of pressure, Sergio always performed better. And, we always felt when he was here like he pitched better when a runner was on second base threatening to score. When he's challenged, he's better. He's very not afraid of anything.
Talking with Chris Hanks from Colorado Mesa, he kind of, he went, 20th, 26th round, somewhere in there in the Major League Draft that year. I heard the story that Joe Strain was actually the scout that was the one that recommended him being drafted. And Joe Strain has some RMAC ties. His dad coached at Metro State, and he played in the Giants system, and he's a Colorado guy. But I would say by no means being drafted there is that a slam dunk to be a major leaguer. But Sergio the thing about him, anytime you watched him pitch, whether it was at Mesa or North Alabama or with the San Francisco Giants, he has that heart that you're talking about. But again, a guy 5'10", what is he, 165 pounds maybe? I mean, not your prototypical major leaguer closer. And this year, Coach, he stepped in for Brian Wilson, one of the best in the game, and the Giants didn't miss a beat and go on to win another World Series. You got to be like a proud papa, don't you?
Well, yeah, he was a kid. It was very difficult getting scouts interested enough to draft him because of his height, because he was an 87 to 88 mile an hour right-handed pitcher, and you can shake those guys out of a tree. And it was a little bit frustrating, although we knew from our standpoint just the competitive level and the command that he possessed and all the intangibles. And, it really took some convincing. There were the majority of the clubs walked the other way. I mean, he was just too short. His velocity wasn't high enough. He didn't fit the bill. And, I remember having a good long talk with Joe Strain and just saying, Joe, man, this is a guy that may end up making you look really smart. And I also said to Joe, and this is a true story, I said he's a type of kid because of the intangibles. He's one of those guys that could make it to the big leagues within 3 years. And he did. He made it in exactly 3 years through the minor leagues. And now, of course, the rest is history. And I think he's here to stay now. I mean, he's becoming a star. He's, as people saw, I mean, he's surgical on the mound. He's the control of that slider and his fastball, he's just very good.
Yeah, I was watching him the other night. I mean, he's filthy, as Joe Buck said during the broadcast, and just when they do that super slow-mo on his arm, the way he torques it, I'm a little worried, for Sergio, because your arm's not supposed to bend that way.
He's pitched that way. He pitched the same way when he was here, and he's had a couple little stints of arm soreness through the minor leagues once and once in the big leagues. But every pitcher does. I mean, the volume of pitches they put on their arms from the first day of spring training to the last day of the year. But Sergio's resilient. I really doubt that he's going to get hurt. He's in the best shape of his life.
Yeah.
I mean, he's in much better physical condition than he was as an athlete here. And, they've made him get to a certain level physically. I mean, that's just part of the deal when you're a pro athlete and you're the property of somebody and they're paying you millions of dollars. And, I'm really happy to see him come in his own. I said 2 years ago I thought he'd be a better closer than Brian Wilson. Of course, I'm biased.
A little bit.
I don't know what the Giants are going to do now, but I mean, Sergio, he can serve in a setup role or a closer role. I know that he would probably prefer the closer role, but also know that he's the type of teammate that if they ask him to be the setup man, he'll do it and won't say a word, and he'll do it to the best of his ability.
Talking with Chris Hanks at Colorado Mesa. He coached Sergio Romo in college. Sergio Romo, now World Series champion for the second time, was on the mound when the San Francisco Giants defeated the Detroit Tigers in Game 4 of the World Series. Coach, did you get a chance to go out there? I know you went out there for his first game that he ever played. Did you get a chance to go to any of these World Series games?
No, I didn't. There's just obviously this time of year too much going on, and it's a little bit of a rat race. So, we stayed around here. When I went out to see him in his debut, of course that was in the summertime when things are slower, but regardless, as I said, we're real proud of him, and I think it's still going to get better for him.
Talking with Chris Hanks. Last thing, Coach, how's the team looking for this year?
I think we ought to have a good club. We have a great group of guys that are very competitive, and we'll see how it shakes out. But we're excited for this spring. All
right, that is Chris Hanks. Coach, thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Eric.
All right, Chris Hanks. He's been around. 15th season will be coming up here at Colorado Mesa University. One of the best coaches in RMAC history as far as baseball goes, and certainly proud of his pitcher, Sergio Romo, as we all are in the RMAC, as he was named RMAC Player of the Century, as you mentioned, in 2009. Getting back to RMAC football, To see what happened this past weekend, let's head over to Chris Polton with our RMAC recap.
Thanks, Eric. CSU Pueblo stays perfect as they dismantle Colorado Mesa on Saturday 48-10. Pack running back J.B. Matthews in his first game back ran for 99 yards and 3 scores. CSU Pueblo quarterback Ross Dowson continued to light it up through the air, completing 16 of 23 for 202 yards and 2 touchdowns. Chadron State stays 1 game behind Pueblo in conference with the homecoming win over Western New Mexico. Eagle QB John McClain led the way, going 20 for 29, 226 yards and 3 TDs. In the loss, Marquis Sumter added yet another touchdown, making that 11 on the season. CSC wins 41-23. New Mexico Highlands trying to bounce back from their devastating loss from last week, hitting the road to Spearfish, South Dakota. The Cowboys using the ground game to get on the board as 2 different running backs score 4 times, 3 of which coming by way of Lavelle Peterson. NMHU beat Black Hills State 46-31. The common phrase in Gunnison rang to the tune of Matt Brown to David Pavelik. The Colorado Mines tandem connected 16 times for 179 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Orediggers bury Western State by a final of 45-6. The Musket was in-house at Rec Stadium as Adams State did battle with Fort Lewis. The Grizzlies pounded FLC with a ferocious ground game. Chaz Butler led the way with 10 carries and 103 yards. ASU wins 55-9 and keeps the Musket for another year. I'm Chris Polton, and that's your RMAC recap.
Thank you, Chris. Our RMAC Players of the Week brought to you by Rawlings. Offensively, Glenn Clinton of Chadron State had 245 yards rushing. That is the high in the RMAC this year in that win over Western New Mexico. Chadron also with the Defensive Player of the Week, Kevin Lindholm, 17 tackles, including 5.5 for loss. And Greg O'Donnell gets his 3rd RMAC Special Teams Player of the Week honor, the freshman kicker from CSU Pueblo. A quick look at the standings here. CSU Pueblo continues to lead the league. They're 7-0, 9-0 overall, number 1 in the nation, number 2 in the region. And again, it's kind of a hit and miss kind of thing with those regional rankings, as CSU Pueblo obviously won, fell in the rankings, but pretty good shot at still hosting a first-round game as long as they went out, which is going to be a tough task because they got 2 games left, including this weekend against New Mexico Highlands, and that figures to be our latest RMAC football game of the year. That is currently scheduled, according to this, for a 2 p.m. kickoff at the Nita and Eddie DeRose Thunder Bowl. Adams State will be at Colorado Mines. That's a noon kickoff from Campbell Field. Black Hills State makes that long trip down to Western New Mexico. That is a noon kickoff. That is the longest road trip in the RMAC this year. Chadron State, not too shabby of a road trip themselves. They go to Fort Lewis this weekend. That'll be a 1 p.m. kickoff in Durango, and Western State takes on Colorado Mesa, kind of an underrated rivalry between those 2 schools. That is also a 1 p.m. kickoff. Look at the standings. Again, CSU Pueblo on top, Chadron State in second, tied with Highlands at 6-1. Chadron State with the tiebreaker, if you will, with the head-to-head win over Highlands. Adams State, Colorado Mines now both 4-3. Western New Mexico, Colorado Mesa at 3-4. Black Hills State, Western State at 1-6, and Fort Lewis still looking for their first RMAC win of the season. When we come back, we're going to talk about the other kind of football, soccer, with Regis head coach Tony McCall. You're listening to the RMAC Radio Show.